Lose weight by stimulating your fat cells? It's possible. This approach seems crazy, but it would be perfect for eliminating bad fats, at the origin of the famous love handles, saddlebags and other bulges. Discover a slimming method as surprising as it is effective to finally find your ideal weight. To understand the problem of overweight, let's first focus on adipocytes, the famous fat cells. Weight gain is associated with increasing their height. They store fat until they are saturated, hypertrophied. When they reach a certain size, they divide, mitosis, to store even more fat. As a result, you get bigger, again and again, as long as the storage process is not reversed. While this finding is easy to understand, it is only the tip of the iceberg. To solve the problem of overweight, we must move away from the classic balance of caloric expenditure versus energy storage, in other words, the balance between what we eat and the calories burned, and focus more specifically on the adipocytes themselves. Some make you fat, others lose weight. Crucial discoveries were made in the early 2000s on the role of different types of fat cells. Indeed, there are white, brown and even beige adipocytes, which have very different roles. A lot of the overweight and obesity issues stem from an imbalance between whites and browns. This would best explain why white adipocytes endlessly store fat. Because white adipocytes store fat. Brown adipocytes allow them to be burned. There is a third type of adipocyte, beige adipocytes, which can change to white or brown depending on our lifestyle and metabolic factors. You know these metabolic differences. Some people gain weight even by eating little. Their metabolism tends to store in fatty tissue. Others, on the contrary, never gain weight even though they eat because their tendency is to catabolize fats. Of course, the treatment of overweight and obesity is not limited to rebalancing adipocytes. To intervene effectively and have lasting results, it is necessary to act on the various factors involved, which are called obesity spectrum disorders. We detail them here, with their respective solutions. Obesity spectrum disorders are not the only components of overweight, but they are the most common causes of failure of weight loss programs. Before you begin a process to lose fat, read each section carefully to determine which disorder is causing you. Overweight or obesity, where is the limit? The classic measure that defines whether you are overweight or obese is the body mass index, BMI. If your BMI is between 25 and 30, you are overweight. If it is over 30, you are obese. We can also look at the waistline, hip circumference ratio. A medical checkup can precisely define your level of overweight or obesity. Stop intoxicating yourself. If you are overweight, consider from the outset that your toxins are poorly eliminated by the kidneys and hepatobiliary function. The toxicity threshold then becomes more important than your own detoxification capacities, and a defense mechanism begins to store the toxins. As these most often have a fat-soluble structure, they migrate to the periphery of the body, in the subcutaneous white adipose tissue, and thus contribute to the formation of fatty deposits. Therefore, one cannot hope for weight loss without engaging the detoxification and elimination pathways. Without it, the weight lost will consist of water, muscle protein and a tiny amount of fat located in the adipocytes containing the fewest toxins. Thus, your weight will stagnate and a regain of the weight will follow. Sulfur foods, especially broccoli but also garlic, onion, radishes, N-acetylcysteine, and with the help of draining plants, choluretics and cholagogues, such as fumitory or dandelion. There are also 7 natural detox solutions to eliminate toxins. Intestine and microbiota. What if they were the culprits? The microbiota has an extremely important role in weight management, as this article in Nutrition Today indicates. This on 3 levels. Calorie intake. An obese person who eats the same quantity and quality of food as a non-obese person absorbs more calories. This is due to the fact that the configuration of the microbiota changes in an obese person and contains fewer beneficial species and more pathogens. Regulation of appetite. Depending on the composition of the microbiota, appetite will be oriented towards sweet, fermentation flora, or salty, putrefactive flora, foods. Regulation of inflammation. An imbalanced microbiota produces inflammation and beneficial bacteria produce fewer anti-inflammatory molecules. This partly explains why low-grade inflammation becomes independent of the amount of white fatty tissue. When you are overweight, especially when you are obese, there is a good chance that the intestinal mucosa is altered and that the microbiota is imbalanced, dysbiosis generally present, for example in the form of candidiasis. Coprological analyses of feces, can be performed by measuring zonulin and calprotectin, which respectively assess intestinal permeability and intestinal inflammation. In the event of intestinal hyperpermeability, it is important to limit or even eliminate the food fragments which open the intestinal barrier. Gluten, present in wheat, barley, rye, oats, triticale, replace with rice, buckwheat and quinoa. Casein from dairy products, at least for the period of weight loss research, favoring plant substitutes. In the event of intestinal inflammation, polyphenols such as curcumin and quercetin can have a very interesting anti-inflammatory effect on the cells of the intestine, enterocytes. If dysbiosis is present, it is imperative to treat it with natural probiotics such as kefir as well as lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species from probiotic food supplements. Urolithin A and B, found in pomegranates, also increases the level of Akkermansia muciniphila bacteria, which is found in insufficient number in obese people and which plays a very important anti-inflammatory role. The real causes of the yo-yo effect. Not many people know it, but white fatty tissue produces inflammatory hormones, adipokines such as TNF-alpha, Illinois 1, Illinois 6, etc. Being overweight thus generates chronic, so-called low-grade inflammation. But this inflammation increases the production of anabolic hormones such as insulin or growth hormone, which accelerates the storage of fat in white adipocytes, therefore weight gain and fat deposits in certain parts of the body. Thus, inflammation becomes automatic in the event of overweight, on the one hand because of the imbalance of the microbiota and on the other hand by the production of inflammatory hormones by the adipocytes, and evolves independently of the excess of adipose tissue. Clearly, if the weight drops and the inflammation does not decrease, the weight you will have lost, for example with a diet, will be resumed sooner or later, and you will resume even more. Low-grade inflammation is therefore involved in the yo-yo effect and it is essential to fight against it to permanently get out of a problem of overweight or obesity. To determine the level of low-grade inflammation, one can measure the highly sensitive C-reactive protein, CRPUs. If this is the case, it will be necessary to limit all pro-inflammatory foods, cow's milk, refined breads and pastas, confectionery, sweets, etc., and follow a course of dietary supplements based on polyphenols, curcumin, quercetin, OPCs, acid ellagic, rosmaric acid, and omega-3s to act in a targeted manner on inflammation. When cells resist. Insulin is used to get glucose into the cells so that they can produce energy. When we are too sedentary, our cells work slowly because they do not need a lot of energy to function. This is where the sensitivity of the receptor to insulin decreases. This is called insulin resistance. If we add to this a diet too rich in refined carbohydrates, candy, white flour, pastries, etc., we will obtain an overproduction of insulin. This despite the quantity of insulin receptors which is less and less important. Because of a sedentary lifestyle. Low-grade inflammation, discussed above, is also involved, as it gradually destroys insulin receptors. The pancreas then produces more and more insulin to overcome an increasingly important resistance which increases the storage of fat. Insulin resistance can be detected using the following biomarkers: blood sugar, glycated hemoglobin and the HOMA index. HOMA equals insulinemia x blood sugar, 22.5. If the values are outside the norm, cures of berberine, usually barberry extract, milk thistle extract, silymarine, and polyphenols, OPCs, quercetin, magnesium, coenzyme Q10 and chromium may be useful.